So the first question is, why is Atma-vichara so difficult? Even after years of practicing, I feel I haven't reached anywhere. I am still bogged down by my vasanas.
We say it's difficult. Bhagavan says it's very easy. There's nothing easier than Atma-vichara. If we think of it, what Bhagavan says is obviously true, because we spend all our time attending to things other than ourselves. When we find it so easy to attend to things other than ourselves, which don't actually exist, which are just mere appearances, how can it be difficult to attend to ourselves, the one thing that actually exists and is ever clearly shining within us, as I am? There's, whatever else we may know, we always know I am, whether we know anything else, as in waking and dream, or know nothing else, as in sleep. The one thing we always know is I am, because that is what we actually are. So attending to ourselves is never actually difficult. There are two reasons why it seems to be difficult. That is, because it is attending to other things are all relatively gross, whereas our own being, I am, is something very subtle. It's not an object. It's not even the subject. It's the reality of the subject. So it is very subtle. So until we clearly understand what Bhagavan is talking about, it seems to be something very, for people often it seems very, what is this I that I have to refer to, I have to attend to? The I that we have to attend to is the same I that is puzzling about what is it, what is the I that I have to attend to? So there's only one I, we just have to attend to ourselves. So firstly, we need to think deeply about Bhagavan's teachings, to understand what he's saying. What he's saying actually is very, very simple, but we just have to attend to ourselves. So the first thing is, it's very easy to fall into this idea, but it's something difficult to do. So first we've got to remove that idea. We've got to recognize that I am is the one thing that is it's our fundamental awareness. Whatever else we may be aware of, we are always aware I am. Awareness of other things comes and goes, but the awareness I am always remains. So it's our fundamental awareness, and it's always so clear to us. Even when we say, people often say, but I'm not able to find this I. The I that says I am not able to find is the I, but there's no other I. It's not one I looking for another I. We are to attend to ourselves. So if we think carefully about what Bhagavan has said, it should be clear to us, but it's actually very easy. So that the first difficulty is our thinking that it is something difficult, the thinking that it's something elusive, something we don't know, whereas it's the one thing that we always know. So once we've overcome that initial difficulty of thinking that it is difficult, once we understand how easy it is, then comes the real difficulty. The real difficulty is that we are more interested in attending to other things than we are in attending to ourselves. In fact, to tell the truth, we don't want to attend to ourselves. We'll do anything to avoid attending to ourselves. Why? For the very simple reason that that attending to ourselves is killing ourselves, quite literally. Not just killing the body. Killing the body that's a minor thing. Bodies come and bodies go. The real suicide is not killing the body. The real suicide is killing ego. And by attending to ourselves, we are killing ego. So until we are willing to surrender ourselves completely, this will always seem difficult. We can illustrate this with an example. Supposing you've got a very sharp knife, and with that sharp knife, and you've got a watermelon, you can use that sharp knife to cut the watermelon. If the knife is sharp enough, cutting a watermelon is relatively hard. Relatively easy. It's not difficult cutting a watermelon. Even though a watermelon has got quite a hard exterior, it's actually, once you put the knife in, you can cut it quite easily. But easier than cutting a watermelon is to cut one's own throat, because the throat is something very soft. We can easily, with the same knife that we cut the watermelon, it's very easy to cut our throat. But though it's very easy to cut our throat, it's also very difficult. Can we do it? No, we can't. Why are we not able to cut our throat with the same knife that we cut the watermelon? Because cutting our throat means we're finished, or at least his body is finished. So because of our unwillingness to do so, it seems very difficult just to take a knife and slit our throat, though actually it's very easy. So the only difficulty is our unwillingness to do so. It's exactly the same with Atma-vichara. Because we are unwilling to surrender ourselves completely, it seems to us to be very difficult to hold on to self-attentiveness, because holding on to self-attentiveness means surrendering ourselves completely, and we are not yet willing to let go of ourselves, let go of this false identity that we now have, let go of the ego which is having that false identity. So the difficulty lies in our lack of willingness. This is why Bhagavan said, Bhakti is the mother of jnana. In order to go deep in this path, it requires all-consuming love. That all-consuming love is what is called bhakti. That is what Akṣaramaṇamālai is all about, because Bhagavan's path is the path of love. Without love, nobody can succeed in this path of Atma-vichara. This is the pinnacle of the path of surrender. This is before we come to the path of Atma-vichara, all we can do is surrender mind. We cannot surrender I. The only way to surrender I, to surrender ourselves, is to investigate ourselves, because the very nature of ego is to rise, stand, and flourish by grasping things other than itself, and to subside by attending to itself. So until we surrendering other things is relatively easy, because we still retain our identity. I am a great renunciate. I've surrendered everything. I've surrendered all my wealth, all my, I've taken sannyasa, I've surrendered everything. We can think like that, but there's still an I but is saying I have surrendered. So that is not the complete surrender. The real surrender is not just the surrender of a renunciation of mind. It is the surrender or renunciation of I. And that requires all-consuming love. Until our love to know and to be what we actually are is so all-consuming, but we are willing to give up everything else for the sake of knowing and being what we actually are, we are not yet ready to surrender ourselves completely. And therefore, this part of self-investigation seems to us to be difficult. It seems to be difficult only because of a lack of willingness. So how do we cultivate that willingness? The most effective way is persistent practice, by trying more and more to be self-attentive. In spite of any amount of seeming difficulty, slowly, we cultivate the willingness, the love, to turn within and to hold on to our being. So that's why Bhagavan said, practice is absolutely necessary. Practice is the only way. Only by persistent practice can we slowly weaken the Vishaya Vasanas and strengthen the Sat Vasana. The Vishaya Vasanas are the seeds that give rise to all our likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, and everything. In other words, it's under the sway of our Vishaya Vasanas that our attention goes outwards. Sat Vasana is the opposite of Vishaya Vasanas. Vishaya means objects or phenomena. Sat means being. So our inclination to hold on to our being, to be as we actually are, that is Sat Vasana. That is what is otherwise called Swatma Bhakti, love for our own real nature, love for our own self. So we can cultivate that Sat Vasana and weaken the Vishaya Vasanas only to the extent to which we practice being self-attentive. Because the nature of Vasanas have no strength of their own. Whatever strength Vasanas seem to have is the strength that we have bestowed upon them. That is, by allowing ourselves to be by allowing ourselves to be swayed by any vasana, we are thereby strengthening it. By refraining from being swayed by any vasana, we are thereby weakening it. So when we hold on to self-attentiveness, or at least try to be self-attentive, we are strengthening the sat vasana and weakening all the vishaya vasanas. So there is no, the path that Bhagavan has taught us is the direct path. So if you're on the direct path and you ask, what is the shortcut? There cannot be a shortcut. The direct path is the shortest cut there is. So there's no shortcut other than this path. We have to follow. That means we have to persistently practice. It doesn't matter how difficult it may seem to be. Even if we are spending, even if it's a moment here and a moment there, every moment of self-attentiveness is of tremendous value, is taking us, every moment of self-attentiveness is a big step in the right direction. So let us treasure every single moment of self-attentiveness. Let us not expect to sit in meditation to be self-attentive for 20 minutes. It doesn't work like that. The more we try to be self-attentive, the greater the force with which the vasanas arise. So it is a struggle. It's an inevitable struggle. That's what Akṣaramaṇamālai is all about. That's what Bhagavan is saying in verse. Sorry, just the number. In verse 7, he says, Uneye matri oda dulatinmel urudiya irupaya Arunachala. That means be seated firmly upon my mind, so that it does not on the mind, so that it does not run outwards, cheating you. Outwards is not there, but run, so that it does not run, cheating you. That implies run outwards. And in verse 8 he says, Usut trulam vida dunai kan dadankida unnara heikata Arunachala. The usut trulam, the mind whose very nature is to wander about the world, so that seeing you uninterruptedly, it may subside, show your beauty. And then in verse 9 he says, destroying me now itself. If you do not unite with me now, destroying me, is this your manliness? So it's all this is praying for the same thing. And then in this verse, why this why this sleep when others are dragging me? What are those others? It's the Vishaya Vasanas. Does this become you, Arunachala? And then in the next verse, Aim Bula Kalba, Ahatilni Puhumbo, Dahatilni Ile Arunachala. Aim Bula Kalba means the 5 sense thieves. That's the same Vishaya Vasanas, but it's drawing our attention out to enjoy the 5 types of sense impression, sense object. And then in the verse 12, Oruvana Munde Oliteba Baruva Unsudei Arunachala. Who can come in? Who can come in only to deceiving you? Oh, how to say it? Okay, now just get the hiding you. Hiding you means that literally means hiding you. It means hiding. It implies hiding from you. That's what it implies. Oruvana munne olitu, hiding from you. Who can come in? This is your trick. So in all these verses, what Bhagavan is talking, the primary problem is the Bhagavan is talking about is about Vishaya Vasanas. It's the Vishaya Vasanas that are making our mind run outwards. It's the Vishaya Vasanas that are making our mind roam about the world. It's the Vishaya Vasanas that he refers to in this verse as in this 10th verse as others. It's the Vishaya Vasanas that he refers to in the next verse as the 5 sense thieves. And when he says, who can come in hiding from you. Again, he's referring to the Vishaya Vasanas. So this struggle to hold on to self-attentiveness is what Akṣaramaṇamālai is all about. It's what the whole spiritual path is about. That is, Bhagavan sometimes used to say, the spiritual path is nothing but a battle being fought in our own will between Satvasana on the one hand and Vishaya Vasanas on the other hand. So we have to be willing to fight this fight, to try more and more to hold on to self-attentiveness. Doesn't matter how difficult it may seem to be, so long as we are trying to be self-attentive, that's all that matters. Because it's our willingness to try is the bhakti. And that is the key to success in this path. Without bhakti, we cannot succeed in this path. So it doesn't matter how difficult it may seem to be. Did we come here to Bhagavan just to do something easy? There's so many easy things you can do. You can do japa, you can do puja, you can do dhyana. All these are relatively easy, seemingly, because they're not threatening the very existence of ourself as ego. Whereas this part, we are putting our head on the chopping block. Are we willing to do so? No, we're not. So every time the axe begins to come down, we jump back. So because we're not yet ready to die. We're not yet ready. We don't have the intense love that Bhagavan expressed when he's saying, Eneyari tippo, destroying me now itself. If you do not unite with me, is this your manliness? Such intense love, such intense willingness to die here and now, that is what is required. So we must have all-consuming love to know and to be what we actually are. And to know and to be what we actually are, we need to surrender ourselves. We need to let this ego be annihilated completely. So that is where the difficulty lies. The difficulty lies ultimately only in our lack of willingness. And the willingness can be cultivated only by persistent practice. So I hope that is an adequate answer to that question.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Thanks, Michael.
Right. So let us not be disheartened by the difficulty. However difficult it may be, we, this small little ego, are trying to become Brahman. Let's think of it in those terms. It's a huge undertaking that we have embarked upon. So let us not be perturbed by difficulty. Success is assured. That I read earlier what Bhagavan says in the 12th paragraph. Those who have been caught just like the prey in the jaws of a tiger can never escape, those who have been caught in the glance of Guru's grace will certainly be saved by him and will never be forsaken. So success is assured in this path. But Eininum Guru Katiya Varipadi Tavarada Nadakavendum. Nevertheless, it is necessary to walk unfailingly in the path according to the path that Guru has shown. In other words, we need to. What is the path Bhagavan has shown us? This simple path of self-investigation and self-surrender. We have to be ready to walk this path. If we're willing to walk the path, success is absolutely assured. But our willingness is required.
The next question, Michael, is I have observed that people commonly chant Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Ramanaya, while you chant Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Aruṇācala Ramanaya. Just out of curiosity, bhav being the same, is there any difference between the two?
Is there any difference between Arunachala and Ramana? No difference. Because there's no difference, I like Arunachala Ramana. But of course it's the same. Whether you say Arunachala or you say Ramana or you say Arunachala Ramana, they are one and inseparable. It is different names for different forms, but the reality underlying the form of Arunachala, the reality underlying the form of Ramana is one reality. So Bhagavan himself coined the name Arunachala Ramana when he was asked about his real identity, who he actually is, whether he's this god or that god or which god he's an incarnation of. He sang, Ariyati Tarajivara Dahavari Jaguhail Arivairami Paramatuman Arunachala Ramanan. Ramana is the Paramatman, but blissfully exists as awareness. That means the awareness I am, in the cave of the heart lotus of all different jivas, beginning with Hari, beginning with Lord Vishnu. So from the highest God to the lowest insect, he is shining in the heart of all of us as I am, that fundamental awareness I am. So how to know that? He says in the next two lines of that verse, Parival ulam uruha, the heart melting with love, Paranandidu Guheyandu, reaching or entering the cave where that sublime supreme dwells, Arivam Biri Tirava, the eye of awareness opening, Nijam Arivai, you will know your real nature, you will know the reality. Adu Veliyam, it will reveal itself. So this is, Bhagavan himself has used that name Arunachala Ramana to refer to himself. Not only in that verse, even in the last verse of Akṣaramaṇamālai, he calls Arunachala as Arunachala Ramana. Malaya Lita Arunachala Ramana ben Malaya Nindarala Arunachala. So the name of Arunachala was so dear to Bhagavan that to think of Ramana without Arunachala, we can't. They are inseparable. So I like to include Arunachala along with Bhagavan's name, because Bhagavan himself liked to include. He never identified himself as anything other than Arunachala. That's why I prefer that. But of course, it's the same as whether you say Arunachala Ramana or Ramana, it's the same. There's absolutely no difference whatsoever. So whether you prefer Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Ramanaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Arunachala Ramanaya, it's just a matter of personal preference, but it's exactly the same.
The next question is, in Happiness and the Art of Being, you write, though there are many people who claim to be spiritual gurus, the true spiritual guru is very rare, and the term guru should only be applied to those rare beings like Buddha, Sri Krishna, Christ, Adi Shankara, Sri Ramakrishna, and Sri Ramana, who have a clear divine mission to reveal to us the path to attain true self-knowledge. You have a very high standard for who the true guru is. Given this, what do you make of the current spiritual marketplace?
This current spiritual marketplace is not a new marketplace. There has been a spiritual marketplace from time immemorial. Sadhu Om used to say, if you want to cheat people, the easiest way to cheat people is in the spiritual market. Because if you go to a vegetable market, for example, and you put a pile of nice round stones, and you say they are brinjals, aubergine, eggplant, if you try to sell them, nobody's going to buy them because everyone knows the difference between stones and aubergine. But if you go to a diamond market and with some nice glittery glass beads, you may be able to cheat some people because not everyone knows the difference between diamonds and glass beads. Not everyone can tell the difference. But if you go to the spiritual marketplace, you can sell anything and everything and you'll find buyers because nobody knows what is spirituality. Why we come to the spiritual path? Because we don't know what is spirituality. If we knew what is spirituality, there would be no need for spirit. What is the spirit? The spirit is I am, because we don't know ourselves as we actually are. None of us know what is true spirituality. So it's very easy to cheat people in the spiritual path. So in all history, in all religions, you find people who are exploiting the belief of others. This is inevitable. But regarding the high standard I have for what is guru, Bhagavan himself has a high standard. See, in the first sentence of the 12th paragraph, he says, Kadavalum Guruvum Unmayil Veralla. God and Guru are in truth not different. So are all these Tom, Dick, and Harry who claim to be gurus, these Babajis and Matajis and all these, are they all, well, they will say, yes, I am God. But are we to take them all to be God? No, it's inevitable. There will always be. But we can't say all of them are totally, but of course, there are some people who are just out to cheat others, to take advantage of others. Some people, many of the gurus, they genuinely believe what they believe in, and they genuinely believe that they are guiding people in the spiritual path. So they may be quite genuine in their self-belief, but it is something completely different to a real guru. Real guru is nothing but, so long as there is ego, there is no guru. Only when ego is completely annihilated, then what is acting through the mind, speech, and body is only God. And that alone is guru. So, yeah, the true guru is very rare. And even those whose egos have been annihilated, the Jiva Muktas, they don't all take on the role of guru. See, Bhagavan's foremost disciple, people like Murugana, Sadhuam, and such people, they would never accept the role of guru because they say Bhagavan alone is guru. No other guru is necessary. So we can't even say that every Nyani is guru. Guru is a special role given to such. It's a divine. I think Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, if I'm not correct, he said certain souls, they have that divine commission. So it's a very special role, the role of guru. And we need not aspire to have that role. What is required is that we are good disciples. We don't have to aspire to be guru. If we are good disciples, we'll be swallowed by guru. That's sufficient for us. But for people who are not ready to surrender themselves completely, there are many of them whose ambition is to be guru. So long as we have an ambition to be guru, we are far from being guru. But one who has any ambition at all, when that one is annihilated, then guru then guru shines forth as our own real nature. But that doesn't mean that I am guru. Where I dies, there is guru. I means the full side. The I that says I am this or I am that. I hope that adequately answers that question.
The next question is, it seems to me that after many years of following the practice of self-inquiry and Bhagavan's teachings, that grace is everything. Without grace on this path, we won't get far. But how to ensure we remain within its hold to stop us moving outwards all the time?
That is what the path is all about. Yes, grace is everything. Bhagavan often used to say, grace is the beginning, the middle, and the end. It's grace that draws us to this path. It's grace that leads us along the path, keeps us on the path, and it's grace that will finally swallow us. So grace is everything. We have to cooperate with grace. That is, grace is not something external. That is, grace is there in our own heart. What is shining in our heart as I am, that is Bhagavan, that is grace. Bhagavan is grace itself. So we, by clinging to him in our heart, we are thereby yielding ourselves to his grace, cooperating with his grace. So we know Bhagavan has clearly taught us the path, trying to turn within, holding on to our own being, onto I am. That is the way to surrender ourselves. So long as we are trying our best to do that, grace will do everything else. So ultimately, what is required is that we yield ourselves to grace. We stop. So long as we're allowing our attention to go outwards, we are rebelling against grace, because grace is the power that draws our attention back within. So we have to yield ourselves to that power by trying our best to be self-attentive. But ultimately, yes, it is grace that does everything. Whatever we seem to be doing, it is only grace doing through us. But we need to play our little part of trying to be self-attentive. I hope I've answered that adequately.
I don't have any more questions here, but if there's anybody who would like to ask any questions.
I wonder, can I ask something then?
Sure, of course.
Hello, Michael. Nice. Thank you very much for your time to answer all our questions. I was wondering, so when Ramana was asked about the nature of what we are, you mentioned Satchitananda, and quite often it's also related as Atma-vichara. But one part that I cannot make it connected is when it is said to be Mauna. I think it's translated as silence. So I was wondering, what does that mean actually in scope of Ramana Maharshi teachings?
You say our real nature is Satchitananda.
I didn't say. Ramana Maharshi said.
Okay. Bhagavan said. Yes, exactly. Bhagavan said. Yeah, but you referred to Bhagavan saying that our real nature is Satchitananda.
Yeah.
What is Sat? Sat is being. Being is itself silence. Silence is being. That is the opposite of it's not exactly. Yeah, we can say the opposite, for want of a better word. The opposite of being is doing. Of course, it's not opposite because we have to be in order to do. But doing is contrary to a nature of being. Being is just being without doing anything. So when it is said that our real nature is Sat, that implies our nature is not doing, but just being. And when we are just being, that is silence. Noise, doing anything is noise. The first noise is the rising of ego.
So it's when you said, I think 2 weeks ago or something, that actually Atma-vichara is not a doing, but it's kind of a being.
It's
so
being,
that's what it implied also with Mauna.
Yes,
it is a being that can be called as silence.
Yes, these are all different. That is, being means being Achala. Achala means motionlessness. What is motionless is silent. Noise comes out of movement.
Yeah.
I mean, even physical noise, what is it? It's a vibration of the air. When there's physical silence, the air is quiet. There's no movement in the air. Of course, Bhagavan isn't talking about physical silence. He isn't even talking about mental silence. Silence is our real nature, because our real nature is just pure being.
So,
sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
A follow up on that. You said as long as the body exists, right? As long as we are here, doing is, of course, natural. So may I assume that when you say being, not doing, that while we're doing something, like I'm cleaning the house, etc., that the ownership should be not there, that it is just prarabdha carrying our body and the duties. So can I say that then when you mean no doing, just being, the no doing part is do, but don't take the ownership, or just not do anything, just sit? I just clarification.
When you say ownership, I think you're meaning the doership. We cannot do without doership. The very fact that I am doing without doership is a contradiction. Doership means the false notion I am doing. That is, what is doing is it is the three instruments of action are mind, speech, and body. These are what are acting. Why we have this sense of doership? Because we experience this mind, speech, and body as I. So doership is the very nature of ego. So long as there's ego, there will be doership. So the state of silence, the state of just being, is the state in which we don't rise as ego. Bhagavan has actually in the 6th paragraph of Nana, Bhagavan has made this, has spoken about this. He says, Nan enum ninevu, kinjitum illa idame sarupamahum. The place, here he's using place, obviously metaphorically, the place which is complete, that means we can take it as a state, or he's using place in a metaphorical sense. Let's just use the word place as he uses it. The place that is devoid of even the slightest trace of the thought called I, that means ego, alone is Sarupa, alone is our real nature. Aduve monomenopadum, that alone is what is called Mauna. Idvaru summa irapadukutan Nyana Drishti and Endrupaya. Only two, that is the name Nyana Drishti, that is Nyana sight, refers only to thus being thus. Summa irupadu means just being, only to just being in this way. That means by not rising as I. Summa irupadavadu, what is just being? Manate atma sarupatil leika sevade, making the mind dissolve in atma sarupa, that alone is just being. So here he's equating Mauna, just being, absence of ego, all these are equated. So long as ego rises, so long as there's a thought called I, what Bhagavan means by the thought called I, he clarifies later in the 8th paragraph, he says, Aduve ahankaram, that is, the thought called I alone is ahankara. Why he calls it a thought? Because it's not the pure I. The pure I is devoid of adjuncts, whereas the thought called I is that pure I mixed and conflated with adjuncts, as I am this body, I am such and such a person. So that is ego. Where that is completely absent, that is Swarupa. And that alone is what is called silence, and that alone is what is called just being, or Jnana Drishti. And that means the state in which mind is dissolved in oneself. So,
understood. But that's the final goal, though, not everyday practice.
That's the final goal, but the path and the goal are not different. Bhagavan says in Guru Vachaka Kavai, he says, Tane upayam, tane upayam. That is, the means and the goal are both only oneself. There's no difference between them. Bhagavan often used to say, if the path was of a different nature to the goal, it couldn't lead to the goal. So the goal is just being as we actually are. The path is to just be as we actually are. How can we just be as we actually are? By not rising as ego. How can we not rise as ego? By clinging to self-attentiveness. So, and self-attentiveness is not a doing. That is, attending to anything other than ourselves is a doing, because our attention is moving away from ourselves. It's a mental activity, attending to anything else other than ourselves. But attending to ourselves is a subsidence of all mental activity, a cessation of all mental activity. So being self-attentive is just being. So we cannot give up the sense of doership so long as we rise as ego. In order to cease rising as ego, we need to cling to self-attentiveness. Clinging to the state in which we are holding on to self-attentiveness, that is the state of just being, sumayirupadu. That is the state of silence, Mauna. That is our real nature, Swarupa.
Which is the same state that we are in when we are in deep sleep, but in somewhere we are just not aware of it.
It is the same state we are in even now, but because we have seemingly risen as ego, we seem to be apart from that. But that is all. We are never anything other than that.
But that after borrowing the awareness of self-awareness.
Yes. Yeah. By rising as ego, we don't cease to be what we actually are. It's all just a seeming rising. If we turn our attention back to ourselves to see what we actually are, we will see that we have never risen as ego. We've always been just as we are. If you look carefully at the snake, you will see that it was never actually a snake. It was always only a rope.
And why also quite often is called a Brahmagantri, because it's like the nod to God or something like that. It's what prevents you to be able to see your true nature.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, man.
Right. So coming back to what you were saying, so long as we are we rise as ego, we have this false identity. I am this body. This body includes all the 5 Śrīs. So it includes all the 3 instruments of action, mind, speech, and body. So doership is the very nature of ego. We cannot get rid of doership without getting rid of ego. How do we separate ourselves from ego? Only by clinging to our own being. So the more we cling to our own being, the more ego subsides, the more doership subsides, and then whatever actions are done by mind, speech, and body, we are separated from that, because so long as we remain subsided in the place from which we've risen, we are unaffected by any action. But as soon as we allow ourselves to rise, even the slightest, by allowing our attention to move away from ourselves, then we get caught up in action. And that ceaseless action is what is called samsara. Samsara means sometimes the samsara is explained as samchara. Chara means moving. Samchara means moving very well. So long as we rise as ego, we are caught up in samsara. That's why Bhagavan says in verse 24 of Uludunapadu, but samsara is nothing but ego itself. This false I that rises between that is neither the body nor is it satchit, but rises between the two, borrowing the properties of both. So Bhagavan's teachings are so simple. They all point back to the same thing. All we need to do is to try more and more to hold on to self-attentiveness. By holding on to self-attentiveness, ego subsides. And if we hold on to self-attentiveness firmly enough and keenly enough, ego will dissolve in its source. And then what always exists alone will remain as it always is. That is Satchidananda. That is Mauna. That is God, Guru, Brahman, whatever you want to call it. And Tattvamasi, we are that.
It's motionless, the name of Arunachala.
Yes. That is the significance of the name Arunachala. Achala, the Chala means movement. Achala means unmoving. So a hill is called Achala because it's unmoving. So Arunachala symbolizes that state of achalatvam or motionlessness or
without action.
Silence. Arunachala is Mauna Swarupa. And Bhagavan is also Mauna Swarupa, but Bhagavan of his own accord never gave any teachings. Whatever teachings he gave was only when he was asked anything. But in Bhagavan's view, there is no ajnana and no ajnani. So to whom is he to give any teaching? Why to give any teaching? It's only when we ask that he gives teachings. That is the true Mauna Guru.
Michael, the next question is, Namaskaram, Michael. I have 2 questions. Can you please explain a bit more about verse 28 of Uladu Narpadu, and mainly where it says controlling breath and speech? And secondly, could you explain the mirror example where light is being investigated, as I'm very keen to listen to the explanation from you.
Okay, verse 28 of Uladu Narpadu, what Bhagavan says is, Erumvumahande eramidate, Niril Virunda Porul, Kana Vendi, Murhu del Pol, Kunda Matial, Pechu Mucha Adiki Kondu, Ule Andu Arya Vendum. Ari. Okay, what that means is, like sinking, wanting to see something that has fallen in water, sinking within, restraining speech and breath by a sharpened mind. Kondamati means a sharpened mind or very keen intellect, a very keen power of attention or power of discernment. It is necessary to know the place where the rising ego rises. The place where the rising ego rises is obviously our real nature. That from which we have risen is the what is the ego? The rising ego is the false awareness, I am this body. What is the place or the source from which it rises? It is only the pure awareness, I am. So in order to know that pure awareness, I am, it's necessary to sink deep within. How do we sink deep within? By a keen, what Bhagavan calls kundamati. That means a sharp, pointed, keen, acute, penetrating, discerning mind or intellect. It means it implies that power of discernment needs to be very keen and very sharp. Power of attention needs to be very keen and very sharp. So by that, and by attending to ourselves very keenly, we also thereby subdue the speech and breath. That is, if we for example, when someone has if someone hears some shocking news, they say, it took my breath away. Because when we're in a state of shock, at least for a brief time, our breathing stops. So when we attend to ourselves very keenly, it will naturally, speech obviously will stop, and breathing also will stop. Of course, we can be partially self-attentive, even in the midst of day-to-day activities. But when we go really deep within, the speech and breath will automatically stop. So much so, when Bhagavan had his death experience at the age of 16, when that intense fear of death came to him, and he turned his attention within to find out, when this body dies, do I also die? His self-attentiveness was so keen, but the body actually became lifeless. For 20 minutes, his body, in many books, it said as if he enacted, he lay down as if he was dead. No, Bhagavan clarified, actually the body was lifeless for 20 minutes. And then after about 20 minutes or so, suddenly the life came back to the body. Many years later, when that's why in the Kali Vemba version of this, oh no, it's not this verse 28. The next verse 29, he begins, in the Kali Vemba version, he begins with Pinnam pol tiendu udalam. That means leaving the body like a corpse. That's what Bhagavan actually did when he was a 16-year-old. That is, his attention turned within so keenly that his body just lay there as a corpse. It was literally, if someone had come in at that time, they would have seen a dead body there. His body had literally died. And many years later, that is when the first biographies were written about Bhagavan. That is, or first big book-length biographies were written. The first one was B.V. Narasimha Swami's self-realization. In that he collected so many stories, and among the stories he collected was what he referred to as Bhagavan's second death experience, which was in about 1912 or so. One day when Bhagavan was returning, Bhagavan and I've forgotten the name, but the devotee, Bhagavan's first attendant, his name has slipped my mind. But anyway, he and Bhagavan had gone to Pachamankara.
Palani Swami?
Yes, Parani Swami, yes, correct. I was thinking Paramal Swami, but of course it's not Paramal Swami, Parani Swami. So Bhagavan and Parani Swami had gone to Pachamankara, and they had a bath in the tank there, and they had the oil bath, which means they rub oil and then sikatul, the soap nut powder, over the body. And when they were returning, it was hot sun, and in the hot sun, Bhagavan felt a bit sort of lightheaded, so he sat on the rock. There was a big rock there called Amai, tortoise rock, I think it is. If I remember correctly, Amai means tortoise, yes. So Bhagavan sat on that rock, and his body became lifeless. And Parani Swami was started to weep, and he hugged Bhagavan's body, and thinking Bhagavan had died. And about 20 minutes later, the life came back to the body. So B.V. Narasimha Swami wrote about this in Self-Realization, and then Sudananda Bharati, he also wrote in Ramana Vijayam, the same thing. And this was in all the biographies that were there. There were many inaccuracies in those early biographies, but Bhagavan didn't point out until later, towards the end of his bodily life. Occasionally, he would point out inaccuracies. So one of the inaccuracies he pointed out one day, he said, though it's referred to as the second death experience, that wasn't actually the second death experience. That was the last death experience. Between what happened in Madurai and that day on Amai-Parai, it had happened to him many times, but the body just became lifeless. And after 10, 15, 20 minutes, the life came back again. But the reason that was referred to as the second death experience, that was the only one that people knew about, because it was actually witnessed by Parani Swami. The other ones it happened, the other times it happened, nobody noticed what had happened to Bhagavan. So Bhagavan said many times his body became lifeless like that. But the first time it happened was that day in Madurai, and the body was actually lifeless for 20 minutes, and the life then came back. So when we turn the attention within so keenly, automatically the speech and breath will be restrained. On the other hand, if we try to restrain the speech and breath, where is our attention? Our attention is on the speech and breath. So we are not sinking deep within. Sinking deep within means we can sink deep within only by being keenly self-attentive. So because we ignore the speech and breath, they are thereby restrained, because our attention is only on ourselves. So I don't know whether that adequately answers the question about the significance of why Bhagavan says restraining speech and breath is not that we have to deliberately restrain our speech and breath. It will just happen automatically when we are so keenly self-attentive, but the mind sinks deep within, the speech and breath will thereby be automatically restrained. So how are the speech and breath restrained? By the same kondamati, by the same keenly, very sharp power of self-attention, the same power of sharp self-attention by which we sink deep within. By that same power of self-attention, the speech and breath will automatically be restrained. So that was the first part of the question. And what was the second part? Or about the reflected... The analogy of a reflected ray, that is, pure awareness is not aware of anything other than itself. The mind is a form of awareness. Mind or ego is a form of awareness, but an awareness that knows things other than itself. So, since nothing other than pure awareness actually exists, being aware of anything other than pure awareness is not real awareness. It's only a semblance of awareness. So it is called chidabhasa. A bhasa means a semblance or a likeness. That's the primary meaning of a bhasa. A secondary meaning of a bhasa is a reflection, because if you look in a mirror and see your face in the mirror, what you are seeing is not actually your face. You're only seeing a likeness or a semblance of your face. So in that sense, a bhasa also means a reflection. So generally, chidabhasa is translated as a reflection of awareness. But I think it's more useful to understand it as to understand the primary meaning is a likeness of or a semblance of awareness. It's not real awareness. It's only seems to be awareness, because real awareness is only pure awareness, awareness that is aware of nothing other than itself. So, but abhasa does also mean reflection, and we can use that. Bhagavan sometimes use the analogy of the sun and the moon. The sun shines by its own light. The moon is the light of the moon is only a reflection of the sunlight. Likewise, in this analogy, the sun is analogous to our real nature, which shines by its own light. The moon is analogous to the mind, which shines only by the light by which the mind is knowing the world is only a reflection of the pure awareness. Because in pure awareness, no world can appear. It's only in the reflected light of the mind that the world appears. So the mind is analogous to the moon, which is a reflected light. So when explaining the practice of the path of self-investigation, one way in which Sadhu explained it was using an analogy, drawing on this fact. That is, if you have outside, you've got bright sunlight, but if you've got a house with no windows, just a small door, or maybe a cave with the opening mouth of the cave, but if you enter the cave from outside, it appears dark inside. So if you want to explore what's inside that cave or inside that house, the light of the sun needs to be reflected in there. So if you've got a small piece of mirror lying on the ground outside, and that mirror reflects the light of the sun into the dark room, you can then use the light, that reflected light, to know what to explore the room and to see what's in the room. But instead of using that reflected light, so long as you're interested in the contents of the dark room, that is the world, you will be using that reflected light to investigate the world and to experience the world. But if you lose interest in what is the what's in that room and are interested to know what is the source of the light by which you're able to see the things, objects in the room, what should you do? You see that beam of light coming into the room, you should follow that beam of light outside. When you follow it outside, you come to the mirror. But when you come to the mirror, you're brought back into the full sunlight. Once you come outside, tracing that reflected ray of light to come to the mirror, once you've come to the mirror, you're then in the full sunlight. This is analogous to turning our attention back within, tracing ego back to its source. Ego is the reflected light. The source from which it comes is the original source from which the light comes is the pure awareness. The pure awareness I am. By following ego, by fixing our attention on ego subsides back into its source, and we are swallowed by the pure light, the light of pure awareness. Likewise, if we follow that is in the analogy, if you're following that reflected beam of light that is illumining the dark room, the more you follow it, the shorter that beam becomes. That is analogous to the subsidence of ego. When you actually come to the point from which that light is reflected, namely the mirror outside, the ego, the ray of light shrinks to nothing. And when you come very close to the mirror, your head covers the mirror, so it's no longer reflecting the sunlight. But then you see, oh, I don't need this mirror to see because I'm in the full sunlight. So, I mean, this is an analogy given. We can think about the analogy and how it applies to this practice of self-investigation. If we follow ego, Bhagavan sometimes used the analogy of a dog following the master's scent. It doesn't matter where the master is. If a dog has caught hold of the master's scent, he will follow that scent relentlessly until he finds his master. The ego is like the scent of the master. If we hold on to ego, that is when we're investigating ego, ego is the mixed awareness, I am this body. When we hold on to that, when we attend to ego, what we are attending to is not the adjunct, but to the essential I am portion of ego. If we follow that back to its source, then that is like the dog tracing its master, following the master's scent and finding the master, or like following that reflected ray of light coming out into the full sunlight and then being swallowed by that full sunlight. So all analogies have their limitations, but the benefit of these analogies is they illustrate, even though ego is not the pure awareness I am, it's a reflected awareness. By following ego, we return to its source. By attending to ego will subside and back into its source, and there we will be swallowed by the light of pure awareness. We mean that it is ego following itself. It's not that in the case of the dog and the master scent analogy, the dog is different, the master scent is different. In the case of this reflected ray of light, the one who is following the reflected ray of light and the reflected ray of light are different. So these analogies, of course, they don't hold good in every respect, because in the case of self-investigation, it is ego following itself. Ego is turning its attention back on itself, thereby it subsides back into its source and is swallowed by the light of pure awareness, which is its source and its substance, its own reality is that light. So these analogies are all useful to a certain extent, but when we come across an analogy, we need to think about it, and we need to understand what it is trying to illustrate. We shouldn't take any analogy too far. We shouldn't think that in self-investigation, but the ego we're investigating is something other than the ego that is investigating. Obviously, ego is investigating itself. By investigating itself, it returns to its source, because so long as we're attending to anything other than ourselves, ego is rising and flourishing. When ego turns its attention back on itself, its nature is to subside back into its source. By subsiding back into its source, it is thereby, when it subsides completely into its source, it is thereby swallowed, and the source, which is the light of pure awareness I am, alone remains. That is like following that reflected ray of light until you're out in the open sunlight. When you're out in the open sunlight, your head covers the mirror, so the mirror no longer reflects light, but the reflected light of the mirror is no longer necessary because you're in the full sunlight. When the dog finds the master, when he follows the scent and finds the master, he's no longer concerned about the scent because he's found what he was following, which is his master. I hope that explains that adequately.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Thank you so much. Thank you.
The next question, Michael, is some may find Atma-vichara an abstract concept to grasp. Could mantra japa be recommended as a starting point?
It could be recommended, but it's Bhagavan of his own accord never recommended anything else, because Atma-vichara is not an abstract concept. Are you an abstract concept? Is I an abstract concept? Well, one thing we all know, we are all saying I all the time. There's nothing abstract about I am. I am is the one thing that is clear of it, but we know more clearly than anything else. The one thing we always know. We don't know I am as it is, because now we have mixed and conflated it. By rising as ego, we mix and conflate the pure I am with a set of adjuncts, namely a body consisting of 5 sheaths. But there's nothing abstract about I am. And attending to I am is also not abstract. It may, to the mind that is accustomed to going outwards, always attending to objects which are gross, it may seem to be something very subtle, but a little effort at being self-attentive, by a little effort at being self-attentive, we quickly become familiar with what it means to be self-attentive. Then it will no longer seem abstract. So what is required is practice. The more we practice, the less abstract it will seem. And why to practice something else? Sooner or later, we have to come to this practice. So why to even when Bhagavan, very instructive, when Kavya Kanta, Ganpati Sastri, when he first came to Bhagavan, actually he knew about Bhagavan several years earlier, but he wasn't interested. But one day when he'd been doing some sort of what he thought was tapas, some mantra japa or something. One day he became very disheartened about his lack of progress because he had certain aims and ambitions and he didn't seem to be achieving anything. So one day he became disheartened by his lack of any progress in the path that he was following. And he happened to be in Tiruvannamalai at that time. I think he was staying in the temple or somewhere. So he then remembered this Brahmana Swami who's living up on the hill. So he thought maybe this young boy knows something. So he climbed up the hill to ask. This was in 1907. I think he first heard about Bhagavan in 1903 or 1904 because he'd been to Tiruvannamalai and lived in Tiruvannamalai for some time. So he came up to Bhagavan. And he said to Bhagavan, I have done crores of japas, I've studied all the Vedas, I've done this, I've done that, and so on, so forth. But still it's not clear to me what is tapas. Please enlighten me. Bhagavan just kept quiet and just looked at him without replying anything. Then after some time, Kavyaganta said, I've read about such Chakshu Diksha in the Sastras, but I don't understand the meaning of it. Please tell me in words. Then Bhagavan said, Nanan embadu engirandu padukirado ade gavanital manam ange linamahum aduve tapas. What that means is, if one attentively observes that from where what says I goes out, there the mind will be dissolved. That alone is tapas. What Bhagavan means here when he says nan, he doesn't mean that in this case, he's not meaning nan in the sense of I am I. He's talking about, because Kavyaganta had said, I have read so many Vedas, I've read the Vedas, I've read this, I've read that, I've done this I've done this, so many crores of mantra japa, I've done this, I've done that. That I that he's referring to, that's what Bhagavan means by nan embadu. What says I. That is I, I in that sense. Engirandu, from where it padukirado, where it goes out, ade gabnital. If one attends to that, if one attentively observes that, there the mind will subside. So from where did this what says I, in our words, ego, from where does it rise? It rises only from our own being, from I am, from the pure awareness I am. So if one attentively observes that, there the mind will be dissolved, and that alone is tapas. That was the first teaching that Bhagavan gave. In many books it is said that Bhagavan then gave a second teaching, but he didn't of his own accord give a second teaching. The reason he gave the second teaching is that Kavyaganta was a bit bewildered by the unfamiliarity of this teaching. So he asked, is it not possible to attain that state even by mantra japa? To which Bhagavan replied, Oru mantra te japam panital under mantra dvani engirandu puruparikiradu endru gavanital manam ange linamar kiradu adutan tapas. And what that means is, if one does japa of a mantra, if one attentively observes from where that mantra sound goes out, there the mind is dissolved. That itself is tapas. So he was asked about mantra japa, but what actually Bhagavan did, he gave the same teaching, because from where does I rise? It rises only from from ego, that which says I. From where does it rise? It rises only from ourself. when we repeat when we do japa of a mantra, when we repeat a mantra, from where is the mantra dwani, the mantra sound coming? It's coming only from ourselves. So in both cases, Bhagavan is recommending, but he's not recommending japa as such. He says, if you do japa, if you attentively observe where the mantra sound is coming from, in other words, if you carefully observe yourself from whom the mantra sound is coming, there the mind is dissolved. That is tapas. So here Bhagavan is not recommending mantra japa. He's recommending what he suggested in the first thing is attending to the source from which ego rises, is the same source from which the mantra. It's the same source from which everything arises, because everything arises from ego, and ego arises from the pure awareness I am. So in both cases, Bhagavan is recommending that we attentively observe ourselves. And because if we observe ourselves, there the mind is dissolved, and that is tapas. So Bhagavan never of his own accord recommended mantra japa or anything else. Even when he was asked particularly about mantra japa, he still recommended the same thing of being self-attentive, because that is the only way to dissolve the mind, and only the state in which the mind is dissolved is true tapas, according to Bhagavan. I hope that adequately answers that question. If you want to do mantra japa, by all means do so, but nothing can be a substitute for self-investigation. So if you want to do mantra japa, while you're repeating your mantra, try to attend to the one who is repeating the mantra. Try to attend to where that mantra sound is coming. It's coming only from you. So attend to yourself. That is the implication of what Bhagavan taught there.
Well, Michael, the next question is, it's just curious. What might a self-realized life look like today without an ashram and with so many things to do and grab our attention in this fast-changing, accelerating world?
A self-realized life looks like I am and nothing but I am. That is, the world appears in whose view? Only in the view of ego. When ego ceases, what is called self-realization is nothing but the destruction of ego. When ego is destroyed, there's no world or modern day time or ancient time or anything. There is just pure being, I am. So a self-realized life looks the same in any age or any circumstances, because it is the state in which ego is destroyed. As Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Ulladu. If ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. So in self-realization, ego is destroyed, everything else is destroyed. What remains is just pure being. Bhagavan has answered this. What it looks like, he's described beautifully in verse 28 of Upadesha Undiyya. What he says in verse 28 of Upadesha Undiyya is Tanadu il yadu ena tan terihil. If one knows what the nature of oneself is, that implies the real nature of oneself, pin, then Anadi, Ananta, Akanda, Satchidananda. Actually, in the verse, he says, Pin, Anadi, Ananta, Sat, Akanda, Chitananda. But that's he put the words in that order for the verse. But what it implies is Anadi, Ananta, Akanda, Satchidananda. So Anadi means beginningless, without any beginning. Ananta means endless or limitless, so it means infinite. So beginningless, infinite. So Ananta means both endless in time and endless in, well, it's beyond time and space, but I mean, it means both eternal and infinite. And akanda means unbroken. In other words, undivided, unfragmented, Satchidananda. So that is what self-realization looks like, and it's irrelevant whether, the modern day world or ancient world or future world, whatever, it's the same. Satchidananda remains Satchidananda, whatever be the appearance of the world. And the world ceases to exist when ego is destroyed, because the world seems to exist only in the view of ego. So in the absence of ego, how can there be any world? In the absence of a dreamer, how can there be any dream? The problem is, this sort of question arises because we take the Nyani to be a person. The Nyani is not a person. As Bhagavan often used to say, Jnana me Nyani. That means Jnana me Nyani means Jnana alone is the Nyani. What is Jnana? Jnana is pure awareness. Nyani means the one who knows pure awareness. So who knows pure awareness? Only pure awareness knows pure awareness. Ego can never know pure awareness because pure awareness can never be an object of knowledge. So the Nyani is nothing but Jnana. But we see the Nyani as a person. And we say, oh, but Bhagavan answered questions and he wrote poetry and he cut vegetables and he went round the hill. So he must be knowing the world just as we are knowing it. No, he's not knowing it as what he knows is only I am. What we see as the world is what he sees as I am. So what he is seeing and what we are seeing is exactly the same. But whereas he is seeing it as it is, as Nadi, Ananta, Akanda, Satchidananda, we are seeing it as this multitude of names and forms. So why are we seeing it thus? Because we've risen as ego. If we investigate ourselves, ego will be destroyed, and what will remain is Anadi, Ananta, Akanda, Satchidananda. I hope that adequately answers that question.
The next question is, says, Michael, how is the concept of Vishaya Vasanas different to the modern concept of the subconscious mind, which they use in modern psychology and psychotherapy? These concepts look similar, at least at a superficial level.
Yes, only at a superficial level. That is, the understanding of modern psychology is very, very superficial. Vasanas are very, very deep and subtle. That is, vasanas are the inclinations that give rise to likes, dislikes, desires, attachments and everything. So they are all our desires and fears and so on in their seed form of the vasanas. How we relate that to modern psychology, I've never really, there's so many different ideas in modern psychology, but nowadays, yes, the idea of a subconscious mind is a very popular idea. But in the vasanas, well, we can't say vasanas are subconscious because we may not be clearly aware of all the vasanas that are in our heart because our attention is looking outwards. But the more we go deep in the path of self-investigation, the more the vasanas rise to the surface and we become aware of them. So the vasanas are only a problem when they rise to the surface. So even to think of them as subconscious is not really very helpful in this path. Yes, in a sense, sometimes vasanas that we were not previously aware of rise to the surface of our mind, but so long as we weren't aware of them, they weren't a problem for us. It's when they rise to the surface of the mind, but they become it's clear that they're a problem. But as Bhagavan said, everything that is inside has to come out. So all the vasanas sooner or later have to expose themselves, because only when they rise to the surface are we free to make the choice whether to be swayed by them or whether to cling to self-attentiveness and thereby not be swayed by them. So it's a very, very different idea. This vasanas is a there are two terms which mean the same: vasanas and samskaras. I haven't come across this sort of this idea anywhere except in Vedanta and in Buddhism and maybe other forms of Indic philosophy and religion. It's there, but this is something far, far deeper than modern psychology, because modern psychology is all about the person, whereas this is about that we are trying. Yes, the vasanas are what make up our personality, but we are trying to go beyond that. We are investigating ourselves to know what we actually are, and in order to know what we actually are, we need to free ourselves from the hold of vasanas. We need to weaken the vasanas so we cease to be inclined to follow the vasanas. So I don't think comparing it with psychology, with modern psychological concepts, would be particularly useful. That is, the concept of vasanas, as explained by Bhagavan, is quite clear and quite simple. Vasanas, Bhagavan particularly used the term Vishaya vasanas. Vishaya vasanas means our inclination to seek happiness in, or to be aware of, or to attend to anything other than ourselves. Vasana means inclination. Vishaya means objects or phenomena. In other words, anything other than ourselves. It's a very simple and very clear concept. And I think if we try and compare it with with concepts in modern psychology, we'll just be confusing ourselves. It's not always helpful comparing the ideas of one system of thought with another system of thought. There may be a certain degree of correlation, but what is it to us? It's of no use to us knowing about these correlations, because we're not here to study psychology. We're here to find out who am I, and what we actually are is beyond the mind.
There was something which I just wanted to mention. When we talk about sanskaras and vasanas, insofar as they are the effects of past actions, of past karma, in both sort of in these Indian traditions, almost all of them in Indic traditions, whether it's the Buddhist or some of these, the Ramanical, doesn't matter which one, the effects of karma, the consequences, they sort of form in a way the shape or the structure to a degree, sort of both our personalities, our embodiment, as well as the world around us, because of course body and world are inseparable. The world we have through our sensory organs. And so it really is much deeper. I mean, Vishaya Vasana, of course, as you say, are the tendencies, so that's a slightly different concept. But the Vasanas as such, they in a way, they provide the context in which inquiry can take place and free will can be exercised. And I think that was really quite an important thing. And it also gets us away from this thing of karmic determinism, that everything is determined. There is a contextual placing. Your place where you are has a lot to do with the past, your past actions, and then of course the tendencies which you have from the past, your Vishaya Vasanas, may direct which way you go, but you do have choices within that to not entirely go along. It's kind of, I think, this is a question which comes up again and again, and I think you pointed this out, but it's just something which occurred to me.
That is, the effects of karma are twofold. One is the fruit and the other is the seed. The fruit is what we experience as prarabdha. That is what is predetermined. But vasanas are what drive us to do the actions that bear the fruit, because they are the vasanas are the seeds. But as you say, we have freedom because the vasanas are only inclinations or tendencies, as you say. So we are free to follow our inclinations or not to follow them. I may go into a shop and see someone's left their wallet there, I may feel an inclination to take that wallet, but I also feel an inclination, no, taking that person's wallet is not, would not be an honest thing to do. So I hand it over to the shopkeeper and say, someone seems to have left their wallet here. If anyone comes asking, please give it. That is because there are conflicting inclinations in my mind. One inclination, oh, it'd be nice to have some money. This person may have a lot of money in their wallet. Or the other inclination is, no, I want to be a good person. I don't want to do anything dishonest. I don't want to deprive someone else of what is rightfully theirs. So I mean, I'm just using this as an example. But as in this case, there are so many conflicting inclinations we have. And we are the ones who decide which inclination we follow. Am I more strongly inclined to be dishonest and to take the wallet, or more strongly inclined to do the right thing and give the wallet to the shopkeeper and ask them to return to whoever comes and claims it? So like that, in every moment of our life, we are faced with choices. We have inclinations that draw us in different directions. We have the freedom to choose which inclinations to follow and which inclinations not to follow. And it's because of this freedom that we are able to practice self-investigation, because the basic choice we have at every moment is, do I attend to myself or do I attend to something other than myself? The Vishaya Vasanas will incline us to attend to other things. The Sat Vasana will incline us to attend to ourselves. But we have the freedom to decide which inclination to follow. So the determinism is only about the prarabdha. That is what we are to experience. That is predetermined. That is the fruit of our past actions, the actions we've done under the sway of our vasanas. That is the agamya, which is the action that bears fruit, is the actions that we do under the sway of our vasanas. And the actions we do under the sway of our vasanas are the actions we have chosen to allow. We've chosen to allow ourselves to be swayed by those vasanas. So it's a far, far, far deeper concept than the modern concept of the subconscious mind. And another thing Bhagavan said about vasanas, Bhagavan compared vasanas to the film in a cinema projector. And he said the whole world is nothing but a projection of our vasanas. Just like in dream, everything we see in a dream is just our own thoughts. And both the seeds that give rise to those thoughts are vasanas. Likewise, our present state is just a dream. So this entire universe is nothing but a projection of our own Vishaya vasanas. All the seeds that give rise to Vishayas means objects or phenomena, are Vishaya vasanas.
Michael, I just missed that a bit. So are you saying that both the objects we encounter in the world, as well as the ones that we feel disposed to perhaps desire or avoid or whatever, move towards it, these are both Vishaya vasanas, that one is a fruit and one is a seed?
No, we can't quite say it like that. That is, everything that we experience is a projection of our Vishaya vasanas. But many of the things we experience, we are not choosing. That is, we in life, so many things are happening, but are not happening according to our choices. There was a pandemic. That pandemic nobody chose to experience that pandemic. It happened to be part of our prarabdha, but there was a pandemic. We may experience poverty. We may experience illness. So many things happen to us, but are not our choice. But though they are not our choice, but that is, Bhagavan explains it very nicely in verse 6 of Arunachala Akṣaramaṇamālai. He says, he describes this process of projection. What he says in verse 6 of Arunachala Akṣaramaṇamālai, in the first sentence he says, Undoru porul arivoli ulameni. That means there is only one substance or one reality. You, the heart, the light of awareness. Uladu unil Alladu illa adisaya shakti. In you exists an extraordinary power which is not other than you. That adisaya shakti is what is called maya or mind. He doesn't say that here, but elsewhere he clarifies that. And then in the next sentence, he is quite. Bhagavan has packed a lot of meaning into it. What the basic meaning of it, or if we expand it slightly, appearing from that means appearing from that adisaya shakti, that extraordinary power of mind or maya, along with awareness, series of subtle shadowy thoughts spinning in the whirl of destiny. Destiny, that means prarabdha, but he uses a Tamil word, not the Sanskrit word prarabdha, but it means prarabdha, are seen on the mirror that is the mind light as a shadowy world picture, both inside and outside, via sense organs such as the eye. That's inside and outside via the sense organs such as the eye, like a shadow picture that stands out or is projected by a lens. So what he means, the series of shadowy thoughts is the subtle vasanas, the seeds that give rise to everything. They are spinning in the whirl of destiny, just like the cinema reel is spinning in the projector. It's the whirl of destiny. So it is the destiny determines what is to happen to us. What we are to experience is determined by destiny. So those are a projection of the Vishaya Vasanas. But we also, the Vishaya Vasanas, that is the projection is at various levels. What is projected on the screen, we have no control over, because that's determined by prarabdha. What we have control over is how we respond to that. That is what is that is, we can be inclined to do this or to do that, to attend to this or to attend to that. That is where our freedom lies. We have no freedom to change what is appearing on the screen, but we have freedom to choose what we attend to. We can put it that way, but even that is not. It's very difficult to grasp this. It's a very extremely subtle and extremely complex process. But all we need to understand is that whatever is appearing outside is a projection of our vasanas, and we have other vasanas that are inclining us to respond to what is appearing outside in one way or another. So those are our responses, our actions that we have. We can choose which vasanas to allow ourselves to be swayed by, but we can't choose the vasanas that are projected as the on the screen, as it were. So it's complicated, and we need not try to break our head trying to understand these things. We just need to understand the basic principles. Ultimately, all we need to understand is that none of these things are real. They all exist only in the view of ego. What we need to know is, who am I? We need to know the reality of ego. If we know the reality of ego, we'll know the reality of all these things. Otherwise, if we try to understand exactly how this projection is happening and what is the relationship between the projected vasanas and the vasanas that are rising to prompt us to act in one way or another, we're investigating. We're not here to investigate vasanas. We're investigating to whom are all these vasanas. Because if we start allowing our mind to go outwards, trying to understand all these things, then we can start building up more and more elaborate philosophies, and more questions will arise, and more theories we'll have to develop to answer the questions. The important question to ask is, who am I? And to turn our attention back within. So understanding about vasanas and things, useful to a limited extent, but we shouldn't try to investigate these things too much, because we will never, we cannot adequately understand these things. And we cannot and we need not. What we need to understand about vasanas is the Vishaya vasanas are the inclinations to go outwards. We need to stop, we need to not allow ourselves to be swayed by those vasanas. In other words, we need to stop attending to the pictures on the screen and attend to the one who is seeing the pictures on the screen.
So lately, I completely am with you, dear Michael. Lately, though, what keeps coming is, if it's meant to be, it'll happen. If it's meant to be, Bhagavan will take me. If it's meant to be, someday it'll happen. Yes. And that just, I'm not calling it complacency because I'm trying. It's literally because I don't know what it means. I know you keep saying it's obvious, but that's what's challenging, is that very subtle thing. I'm unable to, or I don't know what it means to be turning in, I guess, other than detaching from outside. That I am understanding.
You say, I don't know. Who is that I?
Oh God, I know, Brahmastra, please.
Well, that is the only answer. But Bhagavan wasn't using Brahmastra. He was using his Brahmastra for a very good reason, because we talk about I as if it's something that, when we talk about saying it's difficult or it's not clear, but we are using I all the time. That the one thing that we are all clearly aware of is I. Our own existence is very, very clear to us. So all we need to do is to attend to ourselves, attend to our own being, attend to I am.
Michael, can I just interject here a bit? It's something which you said before, that pure awareness itself is that sense of presence, that that conscious presence, that seems to be the I am and so on. And that's why when we're awake, we are conscious, there is a conscious presence, and that's and an awareness of that simply without any contents.
Whether we're awake or asleep, the one thing we're always clearly aware of is our own being, I am.
So that might be a little bit helpful, in terms of, because it's very difficult when one says, the sense I am and being, because we are aware of our own experience. We are aware that we are aware. And perhaps, that needs to be connected, that is where, that is the sense I am. Without that awareness, there is no I am. That is what it is, and that may or may not be helpful, Sudha and others. I don't know. And that's why when we let go of all contents, because our mind is always busy, and there's always a content in that awareness. And when if one is just present, just aware, then there's a sense of peace, and there is that kind of fulfillment within consciousness, within awareness. We're a bit closer to the I amness. But there may be a certain kind of a subtle object still, something crosses the mind, but there is a greater sense of peace. And when people meditate, sometimes they feel that sense because perhaps, for a moment, the mind is less busy. There are fewer contents of awareness. So I think, I don't know if that is helpful at all to anybody, but
yes.
There is one last question, Michael.
Well, can I just say one thing on that? That is, what the word I essentially refers to is only to awareness. Now we have mixed and conflated this basic awareness I with a set of adjuncts. So we're aware of ourselves as I am Shalini, I am Michael, I am. We take ourselves with this body and mind, this person. But what I essentially refers to is just to awareness, that which is aware of all these things. So we need to. When we read Bhagavan's teaching, we need to think very deeply about what it is. And most important, we need to try to put it into practice. The more we put it into practice, the clearer it will become what Bhagavan is talking about. So there's no shortcut. That is, thinking deeply about it is necessary. It's very helpful. But nothing is a substitute for practice. Thinking deeply about what Bhagavan says and understanding what Bhagavan says helps us in the practice, but we can understand only to the extent to which we go deep in the practice. So we've got to think about it. That this is the Sravana Manana Nididhyasana. The Sravana is we carefully read what he's written. Manana means we think deeply about it. Nididhyasana means we try to put it into practice. The more we try to put it into practice, the clearer it all becomes. And so the deeper our Sravana Manana become. And the deeper the Sravana Manana become, the deeper the practice also becomes. So the three go hand in hand. It's an iterative process.
Yes, what Shalini has shared was greatly helpful. I wish there is a follow-up where I could reach out to Shalini. That was wonderful. I almost wish like I had an email that I can reach out to you for just sharing some guidances here. But Michael, what you had said makes sense. Have been doing that. Again, that subtle confusion, I guess, because I'm such a beginner. But Shalini is really...
I am such a beginner, you say. Forget the beginner bit and hold on to the I am.
I know you will say that. I just knew you.
Well, it's the only thing to say. That's what Bhagavan's teachings are all about.
No, I think we're all beginners. None of us really knows. It's just that we're always struggling, all of us.
Let us forget about being... It's true, we are all beginners, but let us forget the beginner bit. Let's hold on to the I am. And the beginner will drop off.
Sudha, or anybody, if there are questions that to be clarified, I think the best way is to just send it to the Ramana email. And, we can start a discussion on it, everyone. And if anybody's there for the face-to-face, it can continue there. Sometimes, that kind of thing does help to clarify. Yeah?
Thank you, Shalini.
There is the last two questions. Okay, so we'll go through them quickly. It's coming up to 5. And this is that it says, can you ask Michael about when we go with the lower vasanas, example, getting angry with a family member after years of trying to be better in the relationship and then feel so guilty and bad about ourselves. What do we do then? I guess cling to I am, but it's so hard when we just feel the swing of the karma once again.
That is, the Vishaya vasanas can be classified as Subha vasanas and Asubha vasanas, but these are just relative. That is, it's a scale. Some are more Subha, some are more Asubha. But it doesn't matter whether they're Subha or Asubha. They're all vasanas. They're all drawing our attention away from ourselves. The way to weaken all vasanas is to turn our attention back to ourselves more and more. The more the vasanas that will be weakened first tend to be the Asubha vasanas. That is, it's, in a way, it's easier to give up the Asubha vasanas. The disagreeable vasanas are easier to give up, or they get weakened first. And so our mind does, as we go deeper in this practice, our mind does get purified. And so the Subha vasanas tend to predominate. But even those Subha vasanas are still drawing our attention outwards. So we need not even worry ultimately about whether they're good, relatively good or relatively bad vasanas. All vasanas, even relatively good vasanas, are ultimately bad because they're taking our attention away from ourselves. So the most effective way to deal with all vasanas is to cling to self-attentiveness. Of course, when we are allowing our attention to come outwards, we need to at least try to avoid the more harmful vasanas, the more disagreeable vasanas. So if you find you get angry easily, you should think about Bhagavan's teachings and think, what is the point of getting angry? All this is just a passing show. In that way, you can even without turning your attention within, you can detach yourself from the more harmful vasanas. But ultimately, we can deal with the vasanas at a deeper level only by clinging to self-attentiveness.
The next question, sort of the last two questions are very quick. It's just some clarification. It says, Michael, what is the word you often use? I think the word is introverted process. I think it must be introverted. Is that the word, Michael? Quite often. It's inward turning, it must be.
Inward turn. I generally don't use the word introversion because introversion has, it's a term that is used a lot in psychology. The actual meaning of introvert is turned within. So we could use that word, but because of its psychological connotations, I generally don't. But the term that Bhagavan uses is antamukham, means facing inwards, or in Tamil, Bhagavan often uses the term ahamukham, which also means facing inwards, but can also mean facing eyewards. But since what Bhagavan means by facing inwards is facing eyewards, it's he's very fond of that term ahamukham. He uses it in many places because the aham has a double meaning in Tamil, because aham is both the Sanskrit first person pronoun I, and it's also a separate Tamil word but means inside. So it has, when Bhagavan talks about ahamukham, it means turning the mind within, but it underlines the fact that turning the mind within means turning the mind towards I.
Michael, I think I've got the wrong word, because this is Sanjay, he wants to ask, because he's written down introvertive process, he's not sure. So let him ask the question, what he wants to clarify. It's better. Sanjay?
Yes. So, sir, you often say that Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana are intuitive process. I don't know.
No. Iterative.
What is that? How do you spell it, sir?
I'm very bad at spelling. Iterative. Iter. IVE.
No.
TIVE.
I'll just spell it once more.
Okay.
It's IT, because it's sometimes it's ITERATIVE. Iterative means when you go back over and over again, you go from 1 to 10 and back to 1, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
You go through the steps again and again.
Sanjay, are you familiar with the English word reiterate?
Yes. I am.
Reiterate means going over again. So iterative means it's what you go over again and again and again.
Okay. You often use this, but I was not able to understand it.
But the reason I use this is often people, sometimes if you listen to lecturers on Vedanta, they say, first you have to do Sravana. If you do the Sravana, then you know what is being, that is the test that you've done the Sravana properly is you can repeat what has been said. But then you have to do the manana. That means you have to understand it. When you can not only repeat what is said, but explain what it means, then you've done your manana. Then you have to do the nididhyasana, as if it's step A, B, C. But it's not. It's step A, B, C, A, B, C, A, B, C, A, B, C, A, B, C. As we go deeper and deeper in the practice, that is, for example, I think this will be the experience of anyone who has been studying Bhagavan's teachings for many years and trying to put them into practice. The same text that we read some 30, 40 years ago, we're still reading the same text, but those texts are far more meaningful to us now than they were 30 or 40 years ago. That is, the Bhagavan's, particularly works like Uludu Napadu, Padeshundia, Nana, they reveal their inner meaning to the extent to which we put them into practice. So now the same text that we may have been reading for the last 30, 40, 50 years, those same texts are far more meaningful to us now than they were even a year ago, let alone 10 years ago or 20 or 30 years ago, because it's as we go deeper in the practice, the same we see more depth of meaning in what Bhagavan said, more significance in every word that Bhagavan has written. So this is why it's an iterative process. As we go deeper in the practice, our sravana will also become deeper, and our manana will also become deeper. That's why I say it's an iterative process. It's a repeated process.
Repetitive process. Repetitive.
Yes. Iterative.
Iterative.
Yes.
Iterative. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
The last question, it's again a brief question. And it says that last year I tried to do Girivalam, but could not walk after some time. I have very soft and sensitive feet, soles. Is it okay to wear thick socks and do Girivalam? What do you think? Maharishi would say if such a request was made.
Generally, barefoot is what is recommended, but it is difficult for many people if they're not used to walking barefoot. But at least we should try for some. I mean, I can't. I'm not an authority on this. What is recommended in the Puranas and what Bhagavan referred to is that it should be done barefoot. But if that's not possible, at least try to do barefoot as much as you can. That's all I can say. I mean, I wouldn't like to condone. I think nowadays people wear socks in temples. So just as people wear socks in temples, you can say, okay, well, in a temple, you'll never go in with footwear. But some people nowadays seem to think it's okay to go in with socks. So the same license you can take, I suppose. You should. The idea is that it's sacred like a temple. Going around the Arunachala is the Adi Linga Swarupa. It's the original Linga form. So going around Arunachala is like entering a temple. So in that sense, for that reason, it is we should treat it as if we are going to a temple. So just as in a temple we will go barefoot, or we certainly wouldn't wear shoes. I think, I mean, people may have different opinions about whether it's right or wrong to wear socks in temples, but certainly temples in cold places, I think people do tend to wear socks because of the cold. So, yeah, I suppose you could take a license. Ultimately, we have to decide for ourselves what we feel is right or wrong. It may be uncomfortable, but sometimes it's worth it. If you're able to bear the discomfort, you will get the satisfaction at the end that you've done it. But if you're not able to bear the discomfort beyond a certain extent, at least do a certain amount barefoot.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm allowed to just speak like this.
No, certainly.
Okay. I just wanted to kind of share a thought that, I'm not saying I'm necessarily right here, but that seems very ritualistic to suggest that it must be done barefoot. You know what I mean? It almost seems very counter to what Ramana is all about, despite it probably being what he said. But
it's not a rigid ritual, but it's just a matter of showing respect. Do you think it's ritualistic if you go to a temple taking off your shoes? It's just a natural thing to do.
No. Oh, actually, I'm just having a real fresh perspective right now that it's also about other people's perceptions. So perhaps also it's perhaps one of the motivations might be how it would impact other people and be a distraction to them.
Yeah, I mean that also we should as far as possible set a good example. But it's just would you feel comfortable going into a temple wearing your footwear?
No, take it off.
Yeah,
this is a little different because this is outside, if I'm remembering correctly. When I went to the room.
Yeah, but the reason we go barefoot round the hill is because it is Arunachala is the Adi Linga Swarupa, so it's like going to a temple when we're going round the hill. But on the same road, if we're going to the shops, for example, if in the middle of the day, if we're staying in Ramanashram and we need to go to the town to do some shopping, the same Giri Pradakshina road, we can walk on with footwear. That's not wrong. because we're not doing it. But when we're going round the hill, it is a form of worship. It's a form of, it's showing our love and devotion to Arunachala. So it's, I don't know, I can only speak about my feelings. To me, I have, when I was living there for 20 years, I was going around almost every day. And it just seems to me the natural and the right thing to do. But I'm not going to prescribe for others what they should do. That's why I say ultimately we each have to decide for ourselves what feels right. But I think it's good to consider how we would feel. Would we feel right to go into a temple wearing shoes? If we wouldn't, then we shouldn't go around the hill wearing shoes.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I was in Tiruvannamalai a few years ago, and I don't know, for some reason I didn't do this circumambulation around the hill, but I did climb Arunachala, and I found that very painful barefoot. I think that's why I perhaps had that comment.
Yeah. Well, nowadays we tend to, well, many of us live in colder countries where footwear is in it. We, at least in the winter, we have to wear footwear, we have to wear shoes, and that softens the feet. And many of us, even if we're living in South India or somewhere, we live relatively, we may be working in office where we have to wear shoes or something. So a lot of us have become quite soft in these matters. But if you're used to it, walking barefoot is not difficult. If you're not used to it, it is difficult. It's true. But well, who is to say? I mean, who am I to say? All I can say is what I feel is right is as far as possible to go barefoot. Or yes, I suppose, but since people take a license in cold places to go into temples wearing socks, you can, like in European countries where there are Hindu temples, you often see people, even Hindu people, they go in with, I always go in barefoot, but I see many Hindus going in with wearing socks. It's a license they take. I suppose the cold is a possible justification for that. I ultimately, it's a matter of why we go round the hill is an expression of our love for Arunachala, and we have to do what feels right to us.
I think on that note, because this is a discussion which can go on, but
it can go.
Point out that sort of rituals are sort of cultural markers, they're norms, which they're there to bring about a kind of respect and social harmony, and every society has them. Something like a thank you is a ritual, and there is a reason why we do it, and shows of respect are there in every culture. And of course, in the Indian setting, you have this thing of taking off your shoes, also in mosques and not so much in churches. So it is to do with a particular culture. At the same time,
there in the Bible. When Moses approached the burning bush, the first thing he was told is, take off your shoes, this is sacred ground.
Yeah.
The same burning bush that said, I am that I am, first told him to take off his shoes. So it's there in most cultures.
Local cultures. But I think the other thing is that it's a question of lifestyle. I mean, people did go about bare feet in India quite a lot. And so you have the sort of bodily tools, if you like, to cope with that.
Yes.
And so there is a possibility of doing it quite easily.
Yeah.
Whereas with the change in lifestyle and culture, it's a bit more difficult. And I think there maybe one can follow the middle way of the Buddha, say a bit of moderation, until and unless, one is able to do it with ease. Because as they say, even for meditation, if you push it too hard, you don't necessarily get the benefit. I mean, so I think one has to be a little bit sensible about these things. It's like with food. I mean, well, it would be lovely to just drink water from the Ganges, but if it's very polluted, you're not going to do that because you'll be sick, I mean, so I think that one can moderate it with love and respect. I mean,
that's why I say ultimately we each have to decide for ourselves what feels right.
Absolutely, yes. So
because I was part of that culture for so many years, for me, it feels right going around barefoot, but I'm not here to tell others what they should or shouldn't do. We each have to do what feels right for ourselves.
Absolutely. We've sort of come to the conclusion.
Can I just say there's one more question someone had written in the chat. Hector had written to everyone, how can we love something that we don't know? Obviously, we can't love something that we don't know. But what we do know is I am. So we can love I am. That's all Bhagavan asks us to do, to love I am, to love our own being. Because our own being is what we always know, and it's what alone is real. Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Aruṇācala Ramanaya.